Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Well, welcome to So Many Books, So Little Time. My name is Joe Nash. I'm here with Zina Shevchik. This is our landmark show, our 10th show. So if you're seeing it for the first time, the premise is very simple. What we do is Zina and I go down to the new bookshelf here in the library, and we go down to our technical services department where they're processing all the brand new books. We bring up a whole bunch of new books, and we're going to tell you about some. So as usual, Zina will be going first. Zina?
Okay. This book caught my attention before I actually saw it highlighted in the Times Union a couple Sundays ago. The title is My Name is Mary Sutter, and it's a novel by Robin Oliveira. And what's interesting about this book is that the author is originally from Loudonville, and the parts of the book take place in Albany. The author lives in Seattle now, so she's not a resident now. But it's historical fiction about the Civil War period, and her main character is a midwife who, am I right? I'm thinking now, I read it a couple of days ago. I looked at it a couple of days ago. If she's not a midwife, she's a nurse, and she wants to learn more in the field of medicine, and none of the physicians in Albany will instruct her. They don't think it's suitable for women to do more advanced medical work, and so she leaves her comfortable household in Albany and goes to Washington, D.C. to tend to Civil War soldiers who are in the hospital at the Union Hotel Hospital in Washington, D.C. I guess that Union Hotel Hospital has been talked about by Louisa May Alcott. I think she actually spent some time there too. And the character, Mary Sutter, learns a great deal about medicine and other things down there. So she, yes, I say her. I'm looking at my notes. She's a 20-year-old midwife. And the reviews for this book talk about how realistic the medical, surgical, hospital scenes are, and that's what makes it stand out amongst many other historical fiction works about the Civil War era. It depicts amputation, delivery of babies, etc., in very realistic terms. It focuses on the horrific medical care during wartime and the chaos of medical care, almost to the point of thinking that it would be better to be dead than to go through the medical system at that time. And so I think it'd be very interesting to many people in our viewing area. In the foreword, the author describes the research that she did for this book, and she mentions the Albany Institute of History and Art, and she gives a shout out to the town of Colonie historian that she worked with, who worked with her. And one thing that I caught that I didn't know that was written in the foreword was that she mentions was that Loudonville was once called Ireland's Corner. So that's just to proof positive of her origins, and that she knows Loudonville certainly better than I do. So my name is Mary Sutter, Robin Oliveira.
Okay, thank you. That book got good reviews.
Yes.
Well, it's always tough to pick books, Zina, when we
Yes, it is.
because I think in case this is your first time you're watching, one of the first couple of shows I mentioned, we get about 100 books a week here, more give or take 100. So this could be a first, because I'm going to start with a fiction also, a novel. It's a fantasy novel. It's called Prospero Lost by L. Jagi Lamplighter. I hope I say that right, J-A-G-I.
Interesting name.
Now, the premise of this book, it takes the characters from Shakespeare's play The Tempest, sort of as you have to accept that all those events really happened. Prospero and Miranda, obviously the two main characters. So the premise of the book is that for the last 500 years, they've been running a company called Prospero Inc., Prospero Incorporated, and what they do is they sort of supernaturally, I guess, it says they aid humanity in its stumbling efforts to survive. So apparently they help out humans down through history. And the premise of the book is, when the book starts, Prospero somehow has gone missing, and Miranda, and with the help of another spirit, not Ariel, but with the help of another spirit, they go try to find him. Someone's after his the staff, his magic staff. But it turns into, I guess, sort of more like it's a fantasy, obviously, but it has a bit of adventure and there's a bit of a mystery. And I guess this one character, this spirit character that comes with her, looking for the father, looking for Prospero, is sort of acts like a hard-boiled detective type. So on the cover here it says, "A touch of Shakespeare and a dash of Sam Spade, a truly fun read." So this book really got some good reviews. I mean, you probably have to like fantasy to maybe like this, but it's got some good Shakespeare references, and I think all the main characters I think they're probably mentioned, but because it's 500 years later, but it looks kind of interesting. So that's Prospero Lost, L. Jagi Lamplighter. Zina?
That sounds very different. This is not all that different. It's not unusual. This is a history. It's called Dark Harbor, The War for the New York Waterfront by Nathan Ward. And it's really well written. I started to read it, and this kind of thing isn't particularly normally of interest to me, but it's written very well. And there's maps of the waterfront and the West and the Hudson, Manhattan Hudson River Wharf. And it's not terribly academic. So it's the original New York mob story of the 1940s. The book jacket reads, "What if the world of the old New York waterfront was as violent and mob-controlled as it actually appears in Hollywood movies?" Well, it really was. And the story of its downfall, the waterfront, is told here in high style by Nathan Ward. Apparently, On the Waterfront, and a movie that we probably all know about, a lot, Elia Kazan.
Yes,
Think about it?
On the Waterfront.
Elia, I'm trying to, On the Waterfront. And Arthur Miller's play, View from the Bridge, which I didn't know, were all based on the journalistic efforts of a journalist from the New York Sun. His name was Mike Johnson, and he was the first to make big news about the other world in Manhattan. They said it was basically its own world, the waterfront area, its own city. It had its own bosses and languages and codes and bankers and soldiers. And so this tells a story from the journalists, Mike Johnson's point of view, all about the strange life of people down on the waterfront during the 1940s and 50s in New York City. So some New York history, Dark Harbor, The War for the New York Waterfront by Nathan Ward.
Okay, here's a book for those of you who are interested in family history, not necessarily genealogy. This is called The Oral History Workshop. And it tells how to, well, the subtitle says, collect and celebrate the life stories of your family and friends. And what it is, it's sort of a practical guide to doing an oral history. An oral history is usually when you interview someone or take photographs. It sort of combines interviewing and maybe a little bit of scrapbooking, and to get a family history or a history of a group of people, say, people who maybe all worked at some factory 50 years ago or something. So it can either be family or a place. And this book tells you how to go about it, how to set up interviews, who to interview, how to record. it has a great section on questions. It has some great pictures. You probably can't see these, of how to use pictures when you're filming of, weddings and family outings, or old school pictures.
The way Ken Burns does.
Yes,
in his
kind of like that.
documentary.
And it tells you how to film, how to interview people, it says prepare and preserving the interviews. It's got a little thing about scrapbooking and how to preserve them, and why do it. And there's some great things. I would say a lot of the book is about what questions to ask, how to ask them, what to get people to talk about, what things you think people might not want to talk about, but they actually do, and how to use old photographs. So it actually looks pretty good. I mean, so that's the Oral History Workshop. Collect and celebrate the life stories of your family and friends. So, Cynthia Hart and Lisa Sampson are the authors.
That's really good, because the genealogy experts suggest that that's like the first place you should start if you're trying to do a family tree, is to actually talk to family and friends.
Before you even try to get
right, to see what clues you can get right from the beginning, simply from the people around you. So that may help
it's a
lot of budding genealogists.
Yeah, a nice book. Okay.
My next book is The Secret Life of the Grown-Up Brain, The Surprising Talents of the Middle-Aged Mind, by Barbara, I'm going to pronounce it Strauch, S-T-R-A-U-C-H. Now, she wrote a book a few years ago, about 6 years ago, about the teenage brain. And she decided to do a book about the middle-aged brain, and she defines middle-age pretty broadly, 40 to 68, she says, right now. Although she says that's always changing, I think that's pretty liberal. But because of our extended lifespan, I guess she thinks 68 isn't too high a number. She's a New York Times science editor, and I picked it up initially because, being middle-aged, definitely, in the upper limits, I certainly noticed that there's a big change in my brain in the last decade or so. And so I was interested if there was anything new being presented than what I've been reading in the papers and magazines. So she's reporting on the latest findings of high-tech brain scans and psychological studies. And she says that until recently, scientists thought information overload was the problem for middle-aged people. We forget names, we have trouble retrieving some information we certainly think we should know about. And she says that the middle-aged brain has been found to be to more calmly manage emotions and information, and it can be more nimble, more flexible, and she uses the word cheerier, even cheerier. That must mean happier. Or maybe we don't know. Maybe we're just not paying attention and we're cheerier. It says that middle-aged people do have more difficulty with name retrieval, and this is because connections in the brain that are required do weaken with age, and they also slow down. But the good news is that there's a lot of things that our brains do better as we age. And she talks about how even though we may forget some facts and names, we are able to see the bigger picture better. We could see connections and patterns better. We can often solve problems. We might not remember facts as well, but we seem to be able to solve problems and handle complex tasks better than ever. And basically what she's saying is that the research is showing that the brain is changing, and that as it ages, and it's not necessarily just decaying, that it's changing in a positive way as well. She reports some things that I've already seen in magazines and newspapers about some things that you can do to increase your brain power as you age. But the one thing that is a definite way to increase your brain power as you age is to exercise, physical exercise. That's the one thing they have proven beyond a doubt, that physical exercise can help you maintain the health of your brain. It talks about food, but all that stuff has been covered before, pretty much, at least where I've been reading. So I recommend this. It's an easy read, a very easy read, and it gives us hope. The Secret Life of the Grown-Up Brain by Barbara Strauch. Joe?
Okay. Well, reading is good for your brain, isn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, now, here's a book which is this, it's only the second volume in a multi-volume work, the other four are to come, of, it's going to end up being a history of post-World War II Britain from 1945 to 79. And this is volume 2. It's called Family Britain, 1951 to 1957, just came out. Volume 1, which we do own at the library, came out a year or two ago, was called Austerity Britain, 1945 to 1951. So this is volume 2. The author's name is David Kynaston. And what he's done, which is was pretty fascinating, what I've looked at, and it's gotten some excellent reviews. And even though both books are like 700 pages, and there's still 4 more volumes to come, it's really become a sort of a surprise bestseller in England. I don't know about America, but what he's doing in this book, he's writing history sort of from the bottom up, sort of everyday life things, everyday people, everyday life. And he uses, I think he listened to a lot of old radio broadcasts. So he's got broadcast reports, newspapers, letters and diaries, and contemporary accounts. What he's trying to do, if I got this right, he's trying to write this book sort of in the present tense with sort of no retrospection. In other words, a lot of the times he's writing about someone, the gist is he doesn't want, the people in here don't know what's coming. And he's trying to write not from the future either. So it's sort of a unique thing. I started reading one. It was very interesting. So this one's called Family Britain, 1951 to 1957. And sometimes some famous people are in here because he uses some of their, like Doris Lessing, I think he uses some of her diaries. But the overwhelming majority of things are from, I guess, just everyday common people. Social history. Social history from the bottom up. Trying to, like I say, he's trying to write it in the present tense, so there's no, I don't think there's anything in here like, in 20 years this would become this. So it's really sort of at the moment. He's trying to write in the present tense, so it looks absolutely fascinating. And the whole thing, it's called Tales of a New Jerusalem, the whole overall thing, but that's what he's going to call all 6 volumes. So this is volume 2, which just came out. Family Britain, 1951 to 1957. David Kynaston, and we own volume 1 if you're interested. And it looks very interesting, very fascinating.
You said the overall title is
Tales of a New Jerusalem. It's going to end up being a whole history of Britain from 1945 to 79. I don't know why he's stopping at 79. But
That's interesting.
Okay.
Okay, my next book is called The Last Empty Places, A Past and Present Journey Through the Blank Spots on the American Map by Peter Stark. This author grew up in a log cabin in the Wisconsin woods. So he decided to try to find some of the least populated, most wild areas still in the continental United States. And he did that, and this is fascinating to me, by getting an aerial, it must be space, what do I want to say, a picture of the Earth from space at night to show the lights on in the United States. And so he found areas in the U.S. where it was relatively like wilderness because of the lack of lights, the lack of electricity. So he picked 4 spots that were pretty accessible to him because he wanted to actually visit these places and report on his experiences in them. And he took his family with a couple of teenagers to a couple of these areas. So let's see, Eastern Oregon, Parts of western Pennsylvania, let's see, oh, I wrote these down. The Gila Wilderness of New Mexico and northern Maine were the 4 places he chose to visit. So it's like a travel log to still somewhat unruined, what do I want to say, unused areas of the U.S. And it seemed not possible to me that Western Pennsylvania had wilderness, but I guess he found it. So he was trying to find out what it is about wilderness and pristine places that inspire humans and what it means to them. And so he mixes his travelogue with stories about his growing up in the woods, Wisconsin woods, and how that affected who he became and how he thinks, and he mixes it with writings and musings by Emerson and Walden, by Thoreau and John Muir. And I found it intriguing, just the fact that he could get into some of these places and how he did it. And it was really an environmental love letter in a way, but it's not sappy. It's very interesting and well written. So I recommend The Last Empty Places, Past and Present Journey Through the Blank Spots on the American Map. Joe? Okay,
now here's a book that may be a little bit difficult to talk about. Whenever you're dealing with sociology, you're dealing with vast generalizations. Obviously, when people say things, it won't hold true 100%, but if you're a sociologist, I guess you got to start somewhere. I don't know. This book is called Red Families versus Blue Families, obviously referring to the red state, blue state divide we have in our country, supposedly. The subtitle is Legal Polarization and the Creation of Culture. And what the authors have done, there's a lot of statistics in here, statistical analysis and interviewing, and like I said, they had to start somewhere. Now, obviously, when you see that map of the red state, blue state, it doesn't mean this whole state is conservative Republicans, this whole state, obviously not. But like I say, they had to start somewhere, and they've come up with paradigms, and it's mainly, again, it's about family and family dynamics and the work. It's basically the book. It says the book the book details surprising realities about marriage, divorce, and sexual behavior. So they're trying to get into these family dynamics and how it affects culture. And they've come up with the blue family paradigm and the red family paradigm. And I'll just read you this couple sentences. You'll get the idea. It's a book you probably have to read because, they admit, obviously, they're generalizing, but I'm sure there's some truth in a lot of this. The blue family paradigm emphasizes the importance of women's as well as men's workforce participation, egalitarian gender roles, and the delay of family formation until both parents are emotionally and financially ready. By contrast, the red family paradigm, often associated with the Bible Belt, the Mountain West, and rural America, rejects these new family norms, viewing the change in moral and sexual values as a crisis. So again, they're generalizing, but from what they have in their statistics, they're making some suggestions, I guess you could say. The authors show how the red-blue divide goes much deeper than this value system conflict. The red states have increasingly said no to blue state legal norms, and as a result, family law has been rent in two. So they talk about family law a lot in here and the changes, and it gets into the culture. I mean, obviously, no place or no group of people are 100% red or blue or whatever, but I think they make some generalizations. The book got some good reviews, and it'll probably give you things to think about. So, red families versus blue families, legal polarization and the creation of culture by Naomi Kahn and June Carbone. Zina?
Good. Okay. My next title is called, it's part of a series, Museum Guides, they're called, travel logs. This one in particular, this one I'm going to highlight, is an art and travel in Europe, and you see 5 cities through the eyes of 5 famous painters. And it's just a beautiful book. It's called A Curated Guide to Your Obsessions. They're highlighting, in other words, how 5 cities influenced 5 artists, but you're seeing the cities through the artist's eyes. It's Van Gogh. I'm sure I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, but Van Gogh in Arles, France, the south of France. It might just be Arles in French. Vermeer and Delft in the Netherlands. That's Dutch, Vermeer. Goya in Madrid, Spain. And Caravaggio in Rome. And Munch in Oslo, Norway. Besides having absolutely stunning reproductions of some of the art of these 5 famous painters, there are also places to stay, restaurants, calendars of events in each of these cities. But mostly it's a timeline of the artist's life and their works of art and the photos of places that inspired particular paintings or actual places where they lived and worked. And it's full of beautiful photographs and artistic renderings. And I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful series. This is the latest. The 2 others that we've gotten follow film and travel, one in Europe and one in North America and South America. And it highlights places where films have actually either been filmed or the subject, the places as subject in some of these films. And we have both Europe and South and North America. And so that was fascinating. A lot of them were older films, so many of you will be familiar with them. So I highly recommend these books, Museum Guides, Art and Travel, or Film and Travel. Joe?
Okay, here's a book. I always try to pick at least one book to let people know that we don't just have fiction, the bestsellers, and the history books, and photography, and all the things we've been talking about. We have all kinds of books here on literally everything. So I guess when I talk about this one, you'll agree. Anyway, this book is called Good Snake Keeping.
That's
all you
great.
snake keepers out there. It's a practical guide, a comprehensive guide to all things serpentine. I saw Zina's book she just talked about. This book has some excellent photographs of snakes.
I wanted to see some depth there and some contrast to see how big those snakes really are.
So it's very basic. It's got introduction, snake keeping as a hobby, why keep snakes, and all about that. Acquiring a healthy, happy snake is a whole chapter. Home and habitat, safe handling and hygiene, nutrition and feeding. Healthcare is a very long chapter here. And then selected species. The last section has about 50 pages of different kinds, what's the best kinds to get, the best kinds to have. So this is just an example of the kinds of books we have. I could say, when you say books on everything, this probably fits the bill. So Good Snake Keeping by Philip Purser. Okay, Zina.
One more. I'm a mystery reader. And I like historical fiction as well. If you've seen this program before, you know that. This is the 4th in a series I just want to bring to the attention of people who might be interested either in historical fiction or a different setting for mystery. This is called A Murderous Procession, a Mistress of the Art of Death novel. So it's by Ariana Franklin. And the protagonist is a woman in 12th century England and Italy. She is basically practicing forensic medicine way before women were allowed to practice any kind of medicine or learn anything about medicine. And so she's from Italy. She's actually an orphaned Jew in Italy who was allowed to learn in Salerno, Salerno in Italy. I guess for a short time they allowed women to learn about medicine there. And she is called to Britain during Henry II's reign, and he uses her to solve some of his own issues and problems in his reign. And Henry II had a very turbulent reign, and during his reign Thomas Becket was assassinated, and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine was imprisoned because of things that she did against her husband. And so there's lots of history in this, and it's also fascinating to see how a woman handled herself during those times, hiding what she really did, but actually being of use during those times. So I recommend the series. I read the first one and it fascinated me. So it's by Ariana Franklin, and the series is called The Mistress of the Art of Death, and this most current one is called A Murderous Procession. So.
Okay, I'm going to do this last one quickly because we're almost done. We have an excellent photography section here, not just on how to do photography. We have a big section on digital photography, how to do it. But we have a lot of great books on photography by famous photographers. This is a brand new book about Dorothea Lange called The Crucial Years. You probably recognize the picture on the cover, very famous. This book deals with her photographs in the 30s and 40s, which is when she became the most famous, the Dust Bowl and all that. And they're very beautiful photographs, and most of them are kind of haunting. There's a section on migrant farm workers. I don't know if you can see some of those.
Oh, full
and
page,
the last
right.
section, she went and took pictures of the when the Japanese Americans were sent to the internment camps, and there's all kinds of pictures of them leaving mainly the cities out west, and then there's some pictures of them in the internment camp. So they're very haunting, very beautiful photographs. Dorothea Lange, one of the first photojournalists in our country, and so this is just one example of a lot. We have a lot of books upstairs by famous photographers and all their famous photographs. So I'm going to end with this. This show will be on all summer, or July, maybe into August, but I just want to remind people this fall, October is going to be devoted to the book Mayflower by Nathan Philbrook. He wrote Into the Heart of the Sea. It's called One Town, One Book. We're going to try and get as many people to read this book as possible. We've bought a couple hundred copies. We're going to have many events dealing with this book. We're going to have several book discussions. We're going to have books available for your book group. If you have a book group you're watching and you want your group to do it, we'll give you 10 or 15 copies to use. We're going to have a noon book talk. Professor Jennifer Dorsey from Siena, she runs the Center for Revolutionary Era Studies. She's going to give us a review of this book in the beginning of the month, get us going. We got some programs for teens. We're going to have a genealogy program. People from Plymouth Plantation, the Plymouth Plantation, over in Massachusetts, are going to come to our library and speak. They're going to give a presentation. And we're going to have a movie from the History Channel, Desperate Crossing, The Untold Story of the Mayflower. So look for these little brochures throughout our library all summer, give you all the events and times. And that's it for this time for So Many Books, So Little Time.